Hello, everyone, and welcome to another amazing Lizzie Daly's Earth Live lesson. So, my name's Catherine, and I'm the Scotland Conservation Officer for the Marine Conservation Society. So, thank you to everybody who's joining in live, and hello to everyone who's watching back later on. Now, this is actually my second Earth Live lesson with Lizzie Daly, and I think today marks 2 months of amazing lessons. There must have been so many scientists and conservationists from around the world sharing a little bit about the life they lead and the work that they lead. So definitely check them all out, and there'll be another one on tomorrow as well. So for those of you who maybe watched my first one, we talked a little bit about my ocean optimism, our favourite sea creatures, and how rubbish in the sea was impacting them. Now, I've also heard today is the International Day for Biological Diversity. So I've decided to try and make a very biodiverse environment. So that means we've got lots and lots of different animals all living happily together. So we've got, who's this over here? Penguin, got a dolphin, we've got Sheila the shark, of course, and another shark up here. And I've even got puffins on my dress today as well. So thank you for everyone who voted the puffin dress. They won out on top. But it's also the World Turtle Day. And last time we actually talked about the underwater symbol that divers use, because I use my mask and snorkel and I go underwater when I'm allowed to. And we talk to each other with our hands. So I think to start the lesson in honour of World Turtle Day, should we all do our turtle symbol again? So for those of you who maybe can't remember, who weren't here last time, put both your hands out like this, one on top of the other, all your fingers together, and then roll your thumbs. And that's the underwater symbol for turtle. So happy World Turtle Day, everybody. So what we're going to talk about today is the other side of my job, the other side of the work that I do. And it's called something like marine litter policy. Ugh, what does that even mean? If you want to have a guess, feel free to pop it into the chat and put it in the comments, because I'm going to let you in on a little secret. 5 years ago, I went to an interview with the Marine Conservation Society for my job, and they asked me what my experience with policy is. And I had to be honest and say, I don't even know what policy means. But because I was able to communicate like we're doing just now and tell stories, that's actually such an important part that I got the job and I've now learnt what policy is. So let's break it down. If we think about marine litter policy, let's think about the word marine first. Can you have a think? What does the word marine actually mean? Everything to do with the sea, isn't it? Our marine environment is our ocean and our seas. It's everything to do with the sea. Now, we talked about litter a lot last time. What's litter? That's quite an easy one, isn't it? It's all the different rubbish, isn't it? So if we've got marine litter, that's basically ocean rubbish. It's rubbish that's made its way into the ocean. And then that last word, policy, what I think of when I say policy is actually the police. Now, what do the police do as their job? They uphold the law, don't they? They make sure that everybody's obeying the law and making sure they play by the rules. And that's what policy is. It's rules and it's laws. So if we then put all those three things together, marine litter policy becomes ocean rubbish laws. And this is the other part of the job that I do, is I try and get new laws to help save our oceans from all of that rubbish. So what we're going to do today together is see if we can come up with some new ideas for some new laws that we want to help save our seas. So maybe start having a think about what laws you would like to see to help save the ocean, and feel free to pop them in the chat and we can talk about them at the end. But what I thought I would do, because it's quite hard sometimes to maybe come up with a law, is tell you about a law that I've helped to change to save the sea. So we're going to go back 5 years ago, and it was actually the first week of my job with the Marine Conservation Society, and I was invited to a meeting about deposit return schemes. Again, what does that even mean? I had no idea. And it turns out that it's actually a really important law in lots of countries to help save the sea and the environment. So if you're coming up with a new law to save the sea, the first thing you need to think about is, what is it we want the law to achieve? What's the new rule that's going to maybe help a certain creature or maybe save a certain habitat like a beach or a kelp forest or the open ocean? So we were actually getting lots and lots of reports from our volunteers who were beach cleaning. So we've got thousands of volunteers all over the United Kingdom who head out as part of our Beach Watch citizen science project to clean our beaches and count how many different types of rubbish they were finding. And these were some of the things that they were finding quite a lot of when I started at MCS. It was these. You know what that one is? A glass bottle, lots of broken glass as well. Also, these, we talked about this one last time, our plastic bottle. And also these, our drinks cans. So all of these were turning up on our beaches in their thousands. And we know that these are a big problem for our wildlife. We know our plastic can maybe get eaten up by some of our wildlife or can maybe get tangled up in it. We know broken glass, that's actually really dangerous even for us on the beach, let alone for our wildlife. And the same with our sharp metal, and when it starts to rust away too, it's not good news. So this was the problem I wanted to fix. We said we need a new law to stop all of these bottles and cans getting in the sea. But what on earth could we actually do? What law can we change? So I decided to ask some friends. And that's a really important thing that you can all do. We can't all save the world or save the ocean on our own. We can only do it by working together. So the first thing I did was chatted to a couple of friends across the world to ask them if they had problems with bottles and cans on their beaches and what did their government, who are the people who pass the laws, actually do. And I was speaking to one of my friends who live in Norway, and she said that they had a great law called deposit return. And I heard this word again. I was like, can you tell me, what is it? What is this deposit return law that helps bottles and cans stay out of the ocean? She said, it's really easy. If you go into a shop in Norway and buy a bottle of juice, as well as paying, say, £1 for the bottle of juice, you also have to pay 20p as a deposit. And I was like, okay, so how do you get your 20p back? Because that's what a deposit means. You give someone a deposit so you know you can get it back. She said, once you finish drinking your drink, you can then go back to the shop or you can go to a vending machine and put your bottle in to recycle it, and then you get your 20p back. And she said, because everybody wants to get their 20p back, everybody recycles their bottles, their glass, and their cans of juice as well. And she said she hardly sees any of them on the beaches in Norway because everybody is better at recycling to get their 20p back. And I was like, that's a brilliant idea. Scotland can definitely have that in place. So once you've got an idea, you've then got to try and convince as many people as possible that it is a good idea. And this is where everybody can get involved with policy work. Everyone can help change the rules and change the laws. So over the last 5 years, I then worked with hundreds of different people to try and convince them that this deposit return law is a good thing and it's going to save our oceans. And there's lots of different people that we need to convince. But who are the main people? If we want to pass a new law, who are the main people that we need to convince? Who's in charge of passing new laws? Does anyone know? It's the government, isn't it? So in Scotland, we've got the Scottish government, and they've got the power to pass new laws to help protect our environment. So that was my ultimate goal. I needed to persuade the Scottish government to pass a new law so that we could have a deposit return system here in Scotland. We'd have to pay 20p, so everybody would start recycling more, so they would then start disappearing from our beaches, which would be wonderful for all of our marine wildlife. Now, to get the attention of the Scottish government, you need to do lots of different things. And working on policy, you might have thought right at the beginning, that maybe sounds a little bit boring. There's loads of exciting things. So I'll give you some examples. Some of my favourite things we did was we worked with a primary school, and they used all the bottles that they'd picked up from a beach clean to make a giant jellyfish out of bottles. And then we actually took that into the Scottish Parliament to show one of the government ministers. And she was so impressed. It was the first time that she wanted to listen about deposit return. So that's the power of young people getting creative, thinking what can they do to catch someone's attention. And this giant bottlefish did that in a fantastic way. So maybe you're creative, maybe you're a bit of an artist. Is there a new law that you think would be a great idea and you've got a brilliant way of trying to create something to catch people's attention? That's so important to help change these rules and to change this policy that we're talking about. Or maybe you're thinking you're really good at maths. Are you really good at science and maths? Because it's actually our beach watch data, all that information that our beach cleaners are collecting has been amazing evidence. It's been the proof that we need to say to the government, this is a problem and deposit return will fix it. So maybe you're really good at counting things up or maybe looking at a problem and coming up with how to solve it. That's really important in policy making too. We've also worked with loads of people who can write a great story. So we've worked with lots of people who've got the stories out in newspapers, on social media like YouTube or Facebook or Instagram, because the more people who know about it, then that almost makes the voice even louder for the government to hear. So maybe you can write a really good story or a poem. Maybe you're a really good photographer and you get a really good picture that you can then put out maybe in your local newspaper or maybe on social media, or even just to show your family and friends to help them understand what the problem is and why we need to all join together to call for this new policy, this new change. So thanks to all of the work of all these amazing people, we all work together as one big group. So there was a charity called the Association for the Protection of Rural Scotland, who I'm a trustee of. So I actually help that charity with all of their campaigns as well as my day job. And they ran a coalition. So that's kind of a fancy name for a big group of everybody all together called Have You Got the Bottle? So basically, we wanted to ask everyone, have you got the bottle? Have you got the bottle to save Scotland's sea? And if they said yes, they joined in the coalition and our voice got louder and louder and louder. So thanks to all of these people, all of the artists, all of the beach cleaners, all of the mathematicians and the scientists and the storytellers, shall I tell you something really exciting? Just 2 weeks ago, the Scottish Parliament agreed to pass the last law that we need to have a deposit return system in Scotland. Woohoo! So this means in July 2022, if you're going to go and buy a bottle or a can of juice in plastic, metal, or glass, you will then pay a 20p deposit. And then when you go to recycle it, you'll get your 20p back. So we then hope to see all of the bottles and cans that our volunteers have been finding on beaches going down as more and more people are recycling. Isn't that fantastic? So what we're going to do next as part of this lesson is I want to hear from you. Now you've heard about an idea that I had and how we helped change the law. Have you guys got any ideas about laws that you would like to change? And what we're going to do is chat about your ideas, but also pretend we are part of an environment committee in the Scottish Parliament. Now, there's lots of different people who work in the Parliament and who work in government. So the government are the people who pass the laws. So they have the power to make things legal and change those rules. What Parliament does is make sure that the government does it well and make sure that the government does a good job. So in Parliament, it's not just the environment that they have to look after. They have to look after our health. They have to look after the justice. So all of our police, they have to look after young people and education and outside. There's so many things that they've got to look after that we then need to find certain people to sit in groups, sit in committees, so they can make sure that everything's being looked after. So we work with the Environment Committee. So I want you all to pat yourselves on the back. You are now MSPs, you're members of the Scottish Parliament, and you've all been elected and voted in to be sitting on the Environment Committee. Now, the Environment Committee recognise that they're not an expert in everything, so they sometimes then call up people who work in different areas to try and get more information, like me. So I've been called up by the Environment Committee to give evidence, so to tell them my story about why I think this is a good idea. So today, Sheila the Shark is going to be the chair of our Environment Committee. And all you MSPs, if you've got any questions that you think you would like to ask me, maybe as a marine conservationist expert or as a marine litter expert, feel free to pop it in the chat, or if you're watching back later, feel free to get in touch with me on Twitter or my email, and we can help you answer your questions so you can make that law the best it can be. And once we've then got these amazing laws, we can then maybe actually write to our local politicians. So maybe it's a law that you want to ban balloon releases, because we talked last time about if balloons go up, what's going to happen? They're going to end up coming back down, aren't they? So we need to make sure that we just ban those releases. So that's a rule, that's a policy change. And we would ask our local council to do that. So we'd maybe get you to write to your local councillor. Or maybe it's a big law like deposit return. So we're going to speak to the Scottish government. Or maybe it's something like a plastic tax. And actually, we just want anything that's made of single-use plastic to then have an extra bit of money added on for industry to pay. That would mean we would have to go to the United Kingdom government, because they've got the power to do that. So there's lots of different people that we can speak to about our different laws. So let me know what you're thinking. So let's have a look in the chat. Happy World Turtle Day, everybody. And Emily, great question about how young people are able to get involved in policy change. So I was actually doing a Q&A session with the Scottish Youth Parliament just before this lesson. And there's also a Children's Parliament as well. So even if you think you're not old enough to vote yet, there is so much you can do with policy change. So maybe get in touch with your representative, the person who represents you in your area at either the Children's Parliament or the Youth Parliament, as well as the Scottish Parliament, and they will all help you to try and get those changes, to get those policies and new laws that you want to see to help save our ocean. And Rachel's asked, do we know how many countries take part in a deposit return scheme? That's a really good question, because the Scottish government wanted to make sure that it was a tried and tested thing. They didn't want to maybe try anything too new and spend a lot of money if they didn't know it would work. So as well as Norway, there's actually over 40 countries around the world that have deposit returns. We had lots of evidence to show that Scotland could then maybe make a world-leading system to be the best by learning from all of the countries around the world. So Mike said that years ago, glass bottles had 10 pence deposit. You're right, we used to have it here, so it's actually not even too new an idea. So sometimes when we're coming up with a new law, maybe you should talk to older friends and family to see if there's anything that used to be a law that we could bring back that's such a good idea, like our deposit return system. So Liam has suggested that single-use cups should be banned and we should be using reusable options. That's a brilliant idea. So we should actually be trying to reduce as much single-use plastic, so things we only use once, like those coffee cups that you sometimes see people using, and that can be a policy change. And the Scottish Government has started to talk about it. They started to change policy in their own buildings, so you can't get single-use cups in their own buildings, but we want it to go further and encourage more and more people to use reusable. So that's a brilliant one, Liam. Chris has said the fashion industry needs a kick. That's some good, strong policy language there. But you're exactly right. Fast fashion is what it's called. So lots of people buying clothes because they're cheap. And again, only wearing them once, which is crazy. So we need to be speaking to lots of different industry. And sometimes it's ones that you might not think be related to marine litter. But we know a lot of clothes, when they get washed, they release something called microfibers, so tiny little bits of plastic into our ocean. So the fashion industry would be a great one to work with, Chris. Good idea. So we then got Emily, plastic milk bottles should be banned in schools. That's a great way to think. Sometimes we can actually change policy and change rules in just our own environment. So chat to your teacher if you're at school. Is there a policy you can change? There's been some brilliant work by young people in Scotland, including Sunnyside Primary and the Ullapool Sea Savers, on trying to reduce single-use straws in their schools and in their local towns, which is brilliant. So some fantastic initiatives, and just shows you the power that young people have. Samantha has said, do you think the UK will follow in the bottle return scheme? Great question, and we really hope so. Working in the United Kingdom, we want the UK to work as a whole group of friends. So now that Scotland has said that when it's going to start, we hope that England and Wales and Northern Ireland will join in too. They're starting discussion about it, but we hope that they'll maybe make those discussions nice and fast, because every kind of minute we wait, more of these are entering the sea, aren't they? So you're right. Maybe look at other countries, maybe see if there's something in England or Wales that we could maybe have in Scotland that we don't have yet. Learning from each other is such a great idea. And then we've got Rachel saying, can we think of more incentives for encouraging people to use reused coffee cups in cafes and not just the 25p charge? Exactly right, Rachel. Creating policy and changing rules isn't sometimes just going for the easy option or the option that we've used before. So we know something called the 5p carrier bag charge, when we had to go, and if you needed to buy a plastic bag, you couldn't get it for free. You had to charge 5p for it. And that meant loads of people started using their reusable bags, and we then saw bags on beaches drop, which is great. But that charge might not work for everything. We need to be creative. That's why it's so important for you all to think up your ideas and see what laws that we can change. And we'll take one last one. We've got Sam asking, all school children should get a trip to the beach or lakes to see and understand the effects. That is a wonderful idea. And that goes all the way back to the ocean optimism we talked about last time, doesn't it? I think we can't expect anyone to try and change the rules or change policy if they don't love the ocean in the first place. So some of the things that you can all do from home right now is make sure that people know about the sea, they love it. And then once you've got them loving the sea again and excited, tell them about your policy ideas, tell them about your rules and your laws that you want to see if they agree. Maybe they'll help you make it even better. And then see if you want to take some action. Get in touch with your local politicians. Show them the action that you're taking at home. Maybe on your daily exercise, you're being really careful, but you're helping remove rubbish from where you go. That's great evidence to show that it's a problem and that we need these rules to change it. And we've got one last one from Rachel. How about there just aren't any reusable cups? Oh, do you mean like single-use cups? So sometimes we could maybe just have a look at what we're using and see if there's actually things that we just don't need at all. Sometimes you don't just need to switch things out. It's all about reducing how much we're using, and that's how we're going to save the sea. So I'm afraid that has come to the end of our Earth Live lesson. Thank you all so much for joining, but let's keep the conversation going. As those of you who maybe did the maths, if I started my job 5 years ago and I had that first meeting on deposit return 5 years ago, and the law only got passed 2 weeks ago, policy can take a long time. So the earlier we can start it, the earlier we'll be able to save Sheila and all of her friends in the sea. So thanks so much for watching, everyone. Keep your questions coming and make sure to tune in to the next Earth Live lesson tomorrow. Bye, everyone.